Welcome back. We here to kick off the next little playlist, which will be our Black Music History series. Basically just covering stuff from the Negro Spirituals all the way up to hip hop. So for this particular segment, we're just gonna touch on 100 rappers and how old they were when they dropped a classic, either single or album. So let's go on ahead and get that popped off. Radio. First up, Radio by LL Cool J. My boy dropped this when he was 17 years old. November 18th, 1995. Let that marinate, let that sink in. All right, going on to the next. Number two, Light as a Rock. MC Light was 18 years old when she dropped this album. This was September of 1988. Run DMC. Run and DMC were both 19 when they dropped Run DMC. 1984, March 27th. Paid in Full by Eric B. and Rakim. Rakim was 19 years old when Paid in Full dropped, and that was July 7th of 1987. Strictly Business. Eric Sermon and PMD were both 19 years old when they dropped Strictly Business. That was June 7th of 1988. Next up, Long Live the Kane. Big Daddy Kane dropped this album when he was 19. Once again, June 21st of 1988. There's something about that year of 1988 that's a special year, kind of like 1994, kind of like 1998, kind of like maybe, I don't know. Those are the years that really stand out. But anyway, yeah, bro was 19 when he dropped this album. It was one of the top. Him and Rakim, who you might, could change out. They both were 19 when they dropped these classic albums. Your boy, Will Smith, at this time in his career, he was a rapper. He was known as the Fresh Prince. His DJ, Jazzy Jeff. Will Smith was 19 years old when he dropped He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. This was March 29th of 1988. From the Bronx, you got Lord Finesse and DJ Mike Smooth. Lord Finesse was 19 years old when Funky Technician dropped. It was released February 6, 1990. 3 Feet High and Rising by De La Soul. Paz was 19 years old. True Goy, the Dove, was 20 years old, and Maceo was 18 years old when they dropped 3 Feet High and Rising on March 3rd of 1989. Yeah, album kind of holds a special place. That's when I transferred out from Malvern out to Amityville Middle School when this joint dropped. So yeah, I got there right as the shit was popping off. Alright, boom. All Hail the Queen. Queen Latifah was 19 years old when All Hail the Queen dropped November 28th, 1989. People's Instinctive Travels in the Paths of Rhythm. Q-Tip was 20 years old The album dropped on his birthday, and Phife Dawg was 19 years old when it dropped. The album was dropped April 10th of 1990. Classic hip hop album. The youth, they were thinking on a higher level. You know what I mean? They had actual messages, they had concepts, and you know, it's, you could argue that there's a difference between then and now. I'm gonna say there is a hell of a difference between the way these youngsters was thinking then versus now, and there's plenty of videos, which we'll shout out some of them later, as far as YouTube channels with these young brothers and sisters out here that review the old music from this era, and they'll tell you out of their own mouths that the quality and the thought processes behind these artists from this era were on a high level compared to now. But anyway, let's keep it moving. Illmatic, one of probably the most I don't even know what to say, one of the best albums, one of the most highly spoken of albums. You know what I'm saying? Like the holy grail of rap albums is this album right here, Illmatic. Nas was 20 years old when the album dropped, which was April 19th of 1994. But he had already wrote probably most of this stuff when he was younger than that. Halftime, I believe he dropped that single when he was like 16. So, the young brother was on a whole other way of thinking, and he was on a whole other frequency, you know what I'm saying? All right, moving on. Road to the Riches. Cool G Rap and DJ Polo. Cool G Rap was 20 years old when Road to the Riches dropped. This was March 14th of 1989. Jumping over to the West Coast, we got Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted. Ice Cube was 20 years old when America's Most Wanted dropped. The release date was May 16th, 1990. Naughty by Nature. Tretch and Van Rock were both 20 years old when Naughty by Nature dropped. That was September 3rd of 1991. Straight out of Jersey, you know what I'm saying? They was holding it down. They were the hottest thing in rap at that time that they came through. I gotta put respect on their name. Boom. Next up, we got the infamous Mobb Deep. Prodigy was 20 years old and Havoc was 21 when the infamous dropped. That was April 25th of 1995. This is another album that it definitely changed, and it had a hell of an impact on the culture for damn sure. You know what I mean? You can't bump this album. You could bump it now and still catch that same vibe and energy of what was being put out. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, they definitely, rest in peace, Prodigy. Shout out to Havoc for, still keeping everything alive and keeping everything going music-wise. So we'll move on. Big L, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous. Another pivotal figure in rap. Had he lived, a lot of people say that he probably would have even been bigger than Nas and Jay-Z and Biggie. He definitely had the game on lock at the time that he was starting to make his mark. And this is another, artist that we'll never, get to see their full potential. But he himself was 20 years old when Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous dropped, which was March 28th of 1995. Shout out, Harlem. The Score, this album by the Fugees. Lauryn Hill was 20 years old. Wyclef John or Jean, don't get me fucked up with these pronunciations, but Wyclef was 26, Prize was 23, Lauryn Hill was 20 when The Score dropped, and that was February 13th of 1996. License to Ill, the Beastie Boys. Mike D was 20 years old, MCA was 22 years old, and AD Rock was 20 years old when License to Ill dropped. The release date was November 15th, 1986. I give these, boys they props. They contributed to the culture. They didn't try to do no culture vulture shit too tough. They knew what time it was. They hopped in their lane, stayed in their lane, and didn't, try to, do all this extra shit. So I fuck with them, on the strength of that, as well as their music. And I think back in '98, I ran into AD Rock at some fancy club in Manhattan back in the day. And he was a cool cat, Anyway, moving on. The War Report by Capone and Noriega. Capone was 20 years old and Nori was 19 years old when the War Report album dropped. And that release date was June 17th of 1997. So, little mini story behind this joint. When I was, back, at the crib, I was recording a little demo, and my producer was this brother by the name of OE. Shouts out to him. Talented producer, and he himself also lived in Queensbridge where his studio was, and I would go out there often, and that's how I found out about Capone and Noriega before, anybody else even knew who they was. So I kind of got some early plugs, information-wise, and even music-wise, to hear some stuff before it even really came out to everywhere else. So once again, shouts out to OE. Hopefully you still out here moving and shaking, and we'll keep this thing moving. Next on the list, jumping over to Chicago, Chance the Rapper was 20 years old when Acid Rap dropped. The release date was April 30th, 2013. Another Chicago rapper, Resurrection. This album by Common, he dropped this album when he was 21 years old. The release date was October 4th, 1994. So, this was, I think, at this time point in history, this might have been his second, might have been his second or third album. Y'all could let me know in the comments, but I want to say this was probably his second, maybe his third, because he had some earlier stuff out, but this was his Illmatic. Let's not ever get that fucked up. This was the Midwest Illmatic, and I happened to be out in Chicago during the summer when that dropped. In my cassette, in my Walkman, I had Illmatic. I had this joint on play. Wu-Tang. They were all Common. He that nigga. All right, moving along. The DOC. No One Could Do It Better. The DOC was 21 years old when No One Can Do It Better dropped, and the release date was August 1st of 1989. Classic album, Quick is the name. DJ Quick Another Cali album, another Cali artist. DJ Quick was 21 years old when Quick as the name dropped, and that was January 15th, 1991. And this album right here may be his first album. It probably was, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, another Cali artist. Snoop Dogg was 22 years old when Doggy Style dropped, and that was November 23rd of 1993. This album right here left a major mark nationwide. I remember, back being when I was back in New York, you had niggas that was rocking Caesars and shit. And some niggas was starting to get the motherfucking cornrows to be like Snoop, dead ass. He definitely left a mark on the game, musically, style wise, trends, fads. Niggas start drinking Tanqueray, gin and juice, all that shit. Alright, next. Alright, back to the East Coast, back to Jersey again. We got Redman. What the album? Redman was 22 years old when What the album dropped. The release date was September 22nd of 1992. This album right here was the album. This was that album. So how Nas had and Biggie had 94 on lock, Redman had 1992 on lock. Fuck what you heard. You know what I'm saying? Speaking of, next up, jumping over to Brooklyn, Biggie, Ready to Die, the Notorious B.I.G. He was 22 years old when Ready to Die dropped. The release date, September 13th, 1994. And if you ever, listen to any of the other little episodes of the podcast, especially my playlist of Story Time by Dre, I think I already told the story. Maybe I didn't. But basically, me and my mans, my boy B Exact, Lord Timbo, you know what I'm saying? We was in a group called Mass Appeal. We opened up for Biggie Smalls for the Greek Fest pre-party at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. This was 1994. And, we got to, meet Craig Mack, Biggie. I knew who Biggie was. I didn't know who Craig Mack was, you know what I'm saying? But nigga gave me a business card and it had the bad boy with the little baby on it. I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't know. The fuck is this shit? Niggas was like, yo, you want to hit the smoke with us? I was like, nah, I'm good. But, it was cool, just to be in the mix and meet a future legend, you know what I'm saying? Or a legend in the making, So we'll keep this thing moving. Criminal Minded. We got to slide to the Bronx now. You know what I'm saying? You got Criminal Minded by Blast Master KRS-One. He was 22 years old when he dropped Criminal Minded. The release date was March 3rd of 1997. 1987. 1987. All right, we was in the Bronx. Now we sliding back over to Harlem. We got Mace. Mace dropped the classic album Harlem World when he was 22 years old. The release date was October 28th of 1997. This Mace had the rap game on lock. If Biggie was number one, Mace was number two. Y'all could dispute me, argue in the comments, goddammit. I ain't trying to hear that shit. If Biggie was number one, Mace was number two. The locks was out, but they were new. You know what I'm saying? Mace was carrying Bad Boy on his back, writing shit for other niggas, Puffy, doing all type of shit behind the scenes. So I'm glad to see that Mace is prospering, doing better than ever. He got the podcast with Cameron. They done patch they shit up, and they get into the next level that they need to get to. So shout out to both of them, and we're gonna keep it moving to the next on the list. All right, back out to the West Coast. We got Dog Food. This was written by the Dog Pound, which consisted of Corrupt and Daz Dillinger, who were both 22 years old when the album Dog Food dropped. The release date was October 31st of 1995. Back to Brooklyn. We got The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. Slick Rick was 22 years old when The Great Adventures of Slick Rick dropped. The release date was November 1st of 1988. Once again, 1988 was a hell of a year. Okay, so we staying on Brooklyn for a minute here. The Sun Rises in the East. This album, written by J. Rue the Damager, dropped on May 24th of 1994. And of course, J. Rue was 22 years old when this album dropped. All right, we'll move on. Before we move on, though, just want to add a comment. Yeah, this definitely was a classic album. He demonstrated lyrics that were just on another level with this album, for sure. All right, moving on to another Brooklyn artist, AZ. Do or Die. This album, written and performed by AZ. He was 23 years old when this album dropped. The release date was October 10th of 1995. Coming down here to Atlanta, Aquemini, Outkast. This album, written by Big Boy and Andre 3000, they were both 23 years old when Aquemini dropped. This album, I want to say, took them from here to here. Goddamn it! It took them to a whole other level. This was the album that they have finally not only achieved the recognition that they, really shouldn't have got probably with that first album, but they got to, enjoy that commercial success. That's when they was just platinum, platinum, platinum. Like it was nothing less than platinum after this. So that was September 29th of 1998 when they dropped this album right here. Let's see. So here we go. Hopping over to Staten Island, we got Takal by Method Man. This album, he was 23 years old when he dropped Takal. The release date was November 15th of 1994. So this album, and just talk about this, it triggered the memory. It triggers a memory of actually Method Man and Redman. So at the time in '95, I'm in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, and I'm moving and shaking, trying to, kind of get my little foot into the door in the industry, however I can, type shit. So from rapping and little ciphers and shit, I end up meeting who I end up meeting, Jamel Simmons. Shout out to him for even, giving me the time of day, being just a nigga off out of nowhere, you know what I mean? He had a group called the Grave Diggers? That was horrorcore. I believe the group was called Grave Diggers. And they all, showed me love and embraced me. And I got to roll with them to a couple of their shows. And that's where they show that they had at the Palladium was where I, met Method Man and Redman. But it was brief. It's not like I was like, oh, we're gonna hang and shit like that. Nah, it was just a quick, all right, whatever. All right. So anyway, moving back to Queens, we have the album Word Life by OC, and OC was 23 years old when that album dropped. The release date for this one was October 18th, 1994. For this next one, we're going to travel on down to Texas. The Diary, Scarface. Scarface was 23 years old when The Diary dropped, and the release date for this album was October 18th, 1994. Moving further west, back to California, we have Warren G, Regulate, the G-Funk Era album. Warren G was 23 years old when Regulate G-Funk Era dropped, and the release date was June 7th of 1994. And just a little, tidbit, out of all of the artists, out there, out of that whole collective, from the Death Row camp, he was the only artist that was signed to Def Jam, while the rest of his, peers were signed to Death Row. All right, the next album, sliding over to Philadelphia, Do You Want More? This album by The Roots was released January 17th of 1995. Black Thought was 23 years old when Do You Want More dropped. So shout outs to everybody else in the group, but let's not get it fucked up. Black Thought was the face of the group, else they wouldn't put his ass on the front of the cover, you feel me? So we'll keep this thing moving. Sliding back to Mount Vernon, Mecca. Well, this is the first artist on the list from Mount Vernon. Mecca and the Soul Brother. This album by CL Smooth, who was 23 years old. This album dropped in June 9th of 1992. Produced by Pete Rock. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, another New Jersey artist. Another classic album that, at least from the aspect of the source type of reference point, this was a 5 mic album by Lauryn Hill. She rapped, she sung. Drake before Drake, you feel me? And she did both of them exceedingly well. She was 23 years old when The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill dropped. The release date was August 25th of 1998. And this is another reason why I say 1998 was another one of those great years. Actually, so you have 1987, 88, I say 1990, of course 94, 93, 97, 98, but probably more bangers dropped in 98. But anyway, moving along. Back on the West Coast, Easy Does It by Eazy-E. Eazy-E was 24 years old when Easy Does It dropped. The release date was November 23rd of 1988. It was so much heat coming out that year. I'm trying to tell y'all, if you can go back into a time machine, this is when cats was first really kind of just getting into these cars, getting the systems tricked out, the subwoofers, all that shit. They was bumping like, you know what I mean? It was so much nice albums out. Niggas was bumping them shits, you feel me? So You had to, come through the strip, letting niggas know you had that new album, that new tape. You know what I mean? I got this shit. You know what I mean? All right, boom. So this one, we here. This is Tupac. All Eyes on Me. He was 24 years old when he dropped All Eyes on Me. The release date was February 13th of 1996. 1996, I have to say, was another year, because as we see these dates, 96 was another one of them great years in music. Obviously, rest in peace to Tupac. I know recently they've been talking about how, Keefy D or whatever is admitted to finally, owning up to the murder or being part of it, mastermind or whatever the hell. But this was, I think, one of the greatest losses in my lifetime, music-wise, as far as an artist, him and Biggie, who, had they lived, the entire landscape of the music game would have been totally different. But we'll move on. Next on the list, we have Kool Moe Dee, I believe, out of Harlem, New York. How You Like Me Now. I remember this single as a kid, but that's the only single I really remember. But let's see, he was 25 years old when he dropped this album, and the release date was November 3rd of 1987. So we'll keep this thing moving. When Disaster Strikes by Busta Rhymes. Busta Rhymes was 25 years old when Disaster Strikes album dropped. Of course, this is a classic. September 16th, 1997. So this dropped. Yeah, this dropped in 97. 97 is another year you got to put respect on. For sure. Jumping back to Staten Island, we got Only Built for Cuban Links by Raekwon the Chef. You feel me? Raekwon was 25 years old when he dropped or made his solo debut. And the release date for this was August 1st of 1995. This album is tough. This album is a classic. This album is in the same breath as a Illmatic or a Ready to Die. This album is everything, at least to me. It may not be shit to y'all. It was everything to me. This shit got me through some tough times as a young person trying to just find a place in the world and all that. It was like the soundtrack to my life at that point. But we're gonna slide on to the next one on the list. The Carter 3, Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne was 25 years old when the Carter 3 dropped. The release date was June 10th of 2008. 2008? Yeah, I think there was some heat coming out around there. We'll see what the rest of the list tell us. Lil Wayne, there's nothing even more to say, you know what I mean? He that dude. All right, now jumping back to Atlanta, we got T.I. with the King album. He was 25 years old when King dropped, and the release date was March 28th of 2006. T.I. All right. Next up, going back to Chicago, we got Lupe Fiasco, The Cool. Lupe Fiasco was 25 years old when The Cool dropped. The release date was December 18th of 2007. Back on the West Coast, we got another one, The Documentary. This album was dropped by The Game when he was 25 years old. The release date was January 18th of 2005. Next on the list, we have Man on the Moon, The End of the Day, Kid Cudi was 25 years old when Man on the Moon, The End of Day dropped. Release date September 15th, 2009. Look, I'm just gonna keep it 1,000. Like obviously, I'm aware of Kid Cudi. I probably listened to a couple of joints back in the day, but I didn't know that was the title of the album. Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. He was 25 years old when he dropped this album. The release date for this album was October 22nd of 2012. Classic album. The next on the list, up in Toronto, you have Drake, the Take Care album. Drake was 25 years old when he dropped this album, and the release date for this album was November 15th of 2011. Culture. This album, written by the Migos from Atlanta, Quavo and Offset were 25 years old. Takeoff was 22 years old when Culture dropped. And the release date was January 27th of 2017. Rest in peace to Takeoff. Next up, we got Black on Both Sides by Mos Def. He was 25 years old when Black on Both Sides dropped. The release date was October 12th of 1999. And you can't mention Mos Def without mentioning Talib Kweli. I like how they did that on the list here. Talib Kweli and High Tech. Well, Talib Kweli was 25 years old when Train of Thought dropped. The release date for this was October 17th of 2000. Making our way back to Brooklyn, we got the return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty version. Old Dirty Bastard was 26 years old when Return to the 36 Chambers, the dirty version dropped. The release date was March 28th of 1995. All right, this one right here, still in Brooklyn, artist-wise, you got Jay-Z, the classic debut album, Reasonable Doubt. Jay-Z was 26 years old when Reasonable Doubt dropped. The release date was June 25th of 1996. All right, back to the Bronx. We have Big Pun with the Capital Punishment album. Big Pun was 26 years old when Capital Punishment dropped. The release date was April 28th of 1998. All right, moving on to the next artist on the list. We have another Chicago entry here, the College Dropout album by Kanye West. He was 26 years old when this album dropped. The release date was February 10th of 2004. This is definitely a classic Kanye album for sure. Sliding across the lake over to Detroit, we have the Slim Shady LP. Eminem was 26 years old when the Slim Shady LP dropped. The release date was 1999. Next up, going to Yonkers. Jada Kiss. He dropped the album Kiss the Game Goodbye. August date was, I mean, the release date, August date, the release date was August 7th of 2001. Sliding back down here to Atlanta, we have a classic album, Chicken and Beer, which was done by Ludacris. He was 26 years old when he dropped this album, and the release date was October 7th of 2003. Next up on the list, we go back to Harlem. At long last, ASAP. ASAP Rocky was 26 years old when At Long Last ASAP dropped. The release date was May 26th of 2015. Okay, back to the West Coast. We have E40 in a Major Way. E40 was 27 years old when a Major Way album dropped. The release date was March 14th of 1995. Get Rich or Die Trying by 50 Cent. 50 Cent was 27 years old when Get Rich or Die Trying dropped. The release date was February 6th of 2003. Another album that, you know, had a major impact. Another album that had the rap game in the chokehold. His wave was major. There's not too many albums that an artist who debut and have the world and the industry go as crazy as he had the shit going when he dropped this album right here. All right, moving on. So now with this one, we sliding out to Long Island. We had another Long Island entry with EPMD, with Rakim. So now we got Public Enemy. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Chuck D was 27 years old when It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back dropped. And a little backstory on just Public Enemy, since we here, you know. I remember, at the little time that I was moving and shaking in the music industry from 95 to 98, I had the pleasure of meeting Chuck and Flav, a handful of times at the various trips I made to their little studio out there in Long Island. Very, cool cats. It was a privilege, an honor to meet them. And, they were cool, you know what I mean? They ain't try to stunt on me and shit like, oh, they showed me love like, like I was just anybody else. So, that was cool. But keep it moving. Next up, back to Yonkers. DMX. It's dark and hell is hot. DMX was 27 years old when It's Dark and Hell is Hot dropped. The release date was May 19th of 1998. DMX owned 1998. Like, there was bangers there. Other niggas dropped bangers and shit like that, I'm sure. But he owned 1998. You know what I mean? If there's a nigga who could own a year, it was DMX. Technically, he owned 1998. He owned 1999. Part of 2000. Another one. Legend. Back to Atlanta. Let's Get It. Thug Motivation 101. Young Jeezy. Young Jeezy was 27 years old when he dropped this album. The release date was July 26th of 2005. 2005, yeah, there was some bangers dropping around in there, 05, 06. This was a wave of his own too. When this album right here dropped, I don't know about everywhere else, but yeah, Atlanta was the city was on fire. It was electric. It was shit was popping. You know what I mean? Around the time that this album right here dropped. Next up, we got Operation Doomsday. New York, we back in New York. Technically, specifically, you could say Long Island. MF Doom. MF Doom was 28 years old when Operation Doomsday dropped. The release date was October 19th of 1999. Before we slide off of that, also rest in peace to MF Doom. Harlem, you feel me? We got Cameron with the classic album Purple Haze. Cameron was 28 years old when Purple Haze dropped. The release date was December 7th of 2004. And as the album tells you on the cover, it was a Rockefeller and Diplomat Records. So yeah, this is when he was, I believe, vice president of Rockefeller. He was definitely like, he was on his shit. You know what I mean? Next on the list, I don't know where the hell Tyler the Creator from, but his album Igor. Tyler was 28 years old when Igor dropped, and that was May 17th of 2019. Back to California, we have Ice-T with the album Rhyme Pays. He dropped this album July 28th of 1987. Classic album. Classic album for sure. The next on the list we have Blank Face LP. Schoolboy Q was 29 years old when Blank Face LP dropped, and the release date was July 8th of 2016. Next up on the list, we have Liquid Swords by The Genius, also known as The Jizza. He was 29 years old when Liquid Swords dropped. The release date was November 7th of 1995. Wu-Tang. I don't even have to say no more. Wu-Tang. Oh, we got another one back to back. We got Ghostface, Ghostface Killer with the Supreme Clientele album. Ghostface Killer was 29 years old when this album dropped. The release date was February 8th of 2000. Next up, back here in Atlanta, we got The State versus Roderick Davis. Gucci Mane was 29 years old when The State versus Roderick Davis dropped. The release date was December 8th of 2009. 2014, Forest Hills Drive. J. Cole was 29 years old when 2014 Forest Hill Drive dropped. This album was released on December 9th of 2014. A classic album. And now we are taking a trip to Virginia Beach with this next entry, which is The Clips with their album Lord Willin'. Malice was 30 years old and Pusha T was 25 years old when Lord Willin' dropped. This album was released on August 20th of 2002, produced by the Neptunes. All right, we got Freddie Gibbs. Freddie Gibbs was 31 years old when Pinata dropped. The release date was March 18th of 2014. Moving along, we have DS2. Future was 31 years old when DS2 dropped. The release date was July 17th of 2015. Another Detroit artist on the list, we have Danny Brown with the album Old. He was 32 years old when this album dropped. October 8th of 2013 was the release date. Back to Brooklyn with this one. We have Hard to Earn by Gangstar. Guru was 13 years, he was 13. Rest in peace, Guru. Guru was 32 years old when Hard to Earn dropped. The release date was March 8th of 1994. Another classic that added to the vibes of 1994 for sure. Moving along, back on the West Coast, we have Victory Lap by Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle was 32 years old when Victory Lap dropped. The release date for this album was February 16th of 2018. Rest in peace to Nipsey Hussle for sure. He was definitely ahead of his time. He was on a different wave, different swag. From a leadership standpoint, he was trying to organize things in the community that a lot of these other cats who are rappers wasn't probably even up on, or they wasn't thinking on that type of time. They wasn't moving like that. And rest in peace. We'll move on. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye West. Kanye was 33 years old when this album dropped. And the release date was November 22nd of 2010. Fly God by Westside Gunn. He was 33 years old when Fly God dropped. The release date was March 11th of 2016. And that was actually a Buffalo artist that we just covered with Westside Gunn. So another one here is Benny the Butcher. Benny the Butcher was 33 years old when Tana Talk 3 album dropped. The release date for that was November 23rd of 2018. Next up, we have Reloaded, Rock Marciano. Rock Marciano was 34 years old when Reloaded dropped. The release date was November 13th of 2012. I want to say he from Hempstead, but I'm not 100% sure. But, in the comments, just, drop what you need to drop in the comments. Down on the bottom, down in that water down there, Miami. Teflon Don by Rick Ross. Rick Ross was 34 years old when Teflon Don dropped. The release date was July 20th of 2010. Underground Kings by UGK. Bun B was 34 years old and Pimp C was 33 years old when Underground Kings dropped. That was August 7th of 2007. Next up, from Atlanta, you have Big Boy, the album Sir Lucius Leftfoot, the son of Chico Dusty. Big Boy was 35 years old when Sir Lucius Leftfoot, the son of Chico Dusty, dropped. The release date was July 5th of 2010. And the next entry we have here is a collab album between Royce the 5'9", who was 37 when Prime album was dropped. The release date was December 9th of 2014. Run the Jewels. Killer Mike and LP were both 38 years old when Run the Jewels album dropped. The release date was June 26 of 2013. Life is Good. Nas. Nas was 38 years old when Life is Good dropped. The release date was July 13th of 2012. The Roots, How I Got Over. Black Thought was 38 years old when How I Got Over dropped. The release date for this album was June 22nd of 2010. Going back to Queens, we have The Renaissance by Q-Tip. Q-Tip was 38 years old when this album dropped. November 4th of 2008 was the release date. Common, The Dreamer, The Believer. Common was 39 years old when this album dropped, and the release date was December 19th of 2011. Next on the list, we have Pretty Girls Like Trap Music by 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz was 39 years old when this album dropped. The release date was June 16th of 2017. The Knight's Gambit. Ka was 40 years old when The Knight's Gambit dropped. Release date July 13th of 2013. I never even heard of that one. I'm gonna have to YouTube that joint and see what he talk about. My man dropped when he was 40. He said, "It's never too late. Never, never, never." Daytona. Pusha T was 41 years old when Daytona dropped. The release date was May 25th of 2018. The 444 album by Jay-Z. Jay-Z was 47 years old when 444 dropped. The release date was June 30th of 2017. And that wraps up this list. And we'll catch you on the next one.